Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. Now students, let's continue with our next topic here, that is reserved constituencies. Now before this students, we were talking about elections. In that part we understood about the importance of elections, the whole process in which elections are held in our country, and also some of the essential features of elections. We also learned about the term that is universal adult franchise. We also understood about the general elections and different elections that take place in our country. I missed some of the names such as the by-elections that take place in our country, but you need not learn about that here. We talked about the Vidhan Sabha elections, and also through the map of Nagaland, the assembly map, we understood how the constituencies are formed or made and or they are fixed. So these are some of the points that you understood in your previous topic here, right? Now in this topic, we are going to understand about the reserved constituencies. Now if I were to ask you the meaning of constituency, now you can answer this question, because now we have understood this term for a lot of time, like in previous topic, constituencies, the term constituency, it came a lot of time, right? So you have understood this term as of now. But here to repeat the meaning of constituency, we can say that now in a specified territory, in a specified area, people, the population living there, they elect their representatives, and this one representative from the constituency is sent to Lok Sabha. Now in India, if I were to ask you this next question, that how many constituencies are there, you can simply answer this question, 543, right? We talked about the Lok Sabha. Yes, but here you are seeing this new term, that is reserved constituency. What do we understand by this term, reserved constituency? Now you have heard about the constitution of our country, students. In our constitution, you must have heard somewhere that we have reservation of jobs. Just taking one example to understand about the reserved constituency here, let us try to understand about the reservation of jobs. Right, you have heard this term or you have learned it somewhere in your previous chapters as well. Now when we are talking about the reservation of jobs, it means that there are certain government jobs, when we are talking about government jobs here, right, to be very specific. Here we see that certain sections for such as SCs, that is scheduled caste. Then we have STs, that is scheduled tribe. Then we have OBCs, that is other backward caste, right? So people belonging to these castes, we see that certain jobs, government jobs, they have been reserved, right? Certain percentage here have been reserved for these people belonging to these categories when we are specifically talking about the reservation of government jobs. And this has been specified in our constitution as well. Now have you ever wondered that why these jobs have been reserved for these certain sections of our society? Now in history also, students, you must have heard about the scheduled caste. You must have heard about the scheduled tribe. You must have heard somewhere about the term untouchables, the term Dalits. We all know that these people, when we are talking about the ancient times, right, and even in modern India, right, you must have heard it or you must have learned in your history chapter as well. Now these people, they were discriminated. Now when our constitution was being prepared, definitely the makers of the constitution, at the back of the mind, they had this thought that each and everyone should be treated equally, right, in our country. Whether it is, if we are talking about elections, whether we are talking about jobs or any other thing, right, everyone should be treated equally. So therefore, they knew that there are certain weaker sections of the society. They would not have the chance to fight in elections. They might not have a chance to get good jobs. They might not have a chance to get equal opportunities like the rich section of the society, right? So to balance this difference here, reservations of jobs, reservation in these constituencies or the constituencies being reserved, these ideas came up, and these have been included in our constitution as well. Okay, I'm just giving you an example for reservation of job here to basically understand why are these constituencies reserved for certain sections of society. Now, what happens in a reserved constituency? In reserved constituencies, only a person who belongs to a scheduled caste or scheduled tribe can stand for election. Okay? Now, here we are going to understand through the data. Do not worry, we will understand through the data what are these reserved constituencies, how many numbers are there, who are these people who can stand in election. Okay? Now, the unreserved constituencies, they are also called general constituencies. Now, here are two terms that you have to keep in mind. The first term is your reserved constituencies, that is for the people belonging to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. The government has given this name. The term has been framed here for the Dalits, for the people who were the weaker sections, who belong to this weaker section of our society. Okay? But we also have unreserved constituencies, that is for the general constituencies. It means that people who are not belonging to these castes or tribes or these section, okay, the weaker section here, they will fight the elections from these unreserved constituencies. Okay? Now, what is a reserved constituency? Like I told you, a constituency reserved for SC/ST communities. General category candidates, they cannot contest in such constituencies. Remember this point, unreserved constituencies will very much different from the reserved constituencies. It means that the people belonging to the general category, right, they are not allowed to fight the election from these reserved constituencies. Now, here in Lok Sabha, how many constituencies are there? Now, each and every student can answer this question. There are 543 constituencies. Now, when we are talking about the reserved seats in Lok Sabha, how many reserved seats are there? Here, as you can see, according to the data, we have around 131 reserved seats. We are talking about the reserved constituency here. Now, we have learnt about the two communities here, the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. Correct or not? Specifically, when we are talking about the two communities here, we have total number of 84 seats that have been reserved for the scheduled caste. Now, when we are talking about the scheduled tribe, we have 47 number of seats that have been reserved for the scheduled tribe. So, these are some of the points, students, that you have to keep in mind. Yes, you might think that in your book you have different number given there, right? Different data has been given there. So, do not worry about that. If we look at according to the latest election year, right, the latest data of 2019 general election, we have 84 seats here reserved for scheduled caste. It means that from those constituencies, these people, right, 84 seats are there from which they can contest elections. Now, do you think that this is a fair way of contesting elections? Do you think that reservation is a good thing or a bad thing? Reserved constituency, the whole concept, is it good or is it bad? What do you think? I mean, I want you to ponder your thoughts here on this topic about reserved constituencies. Now, here students, think about the advantages. Because when we are talking about reserved constituencies, some might think that this is fair or it might be unfair for the people belonging to the general category. Why? Because they cannot contest elections from these reserved constituencies. There might be a thought on this. Definitely yes, right? But think about the time when these people belonging to the weaker sections, they were not given equal opportunities, right? They were discriminated. Okay? So, when we are talking about the advantages of reserved constituencies, we can think a lot of points can be given to the when we are talking about the advantages of reserved constituencies. Okay, so the people who are belonging to weaker sections, who are belonging to the scheduled caste, who are belonging to the scheduled tribes, who are not given equal opportunities, they would have never thought of fighting in elections. Just think about a time when we are talking about, obviously, I refer to your history section. In your history section, you will learn about the conditions of these people, the people belonging to weaker sections, how they were discriminated in our society. And why reserved constituencies? The whole idea or whole concept of reserved constituencies, it came in our constitution. Or why the makers of the constitution, they thought that there are certain constituencies that should be reserved for them. It's just because they would have never got this opportunity, this equal opportunity of fighting in the election, of representing their community, of representing their weaker section, of representing the weaker section in the society. Okay, so basically people belonging to these weaker sections, to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, without reservation, they would never have got an opportunity to win an election. And this is very true, students. Yes. So this is the first point, and when we are talking about the advantages of reserved constituencies, you have to keep this point in mind here. Also, they would never have the resources, education and contact to fight an election on equal terms. Yes, we know that in our society, gaps exist, right? When we are talking about the rich people, the richer section of our society, when we are talking about the poor section of our society, when we are talking about the people belonging to these castes, the minority groups, definitely inequality, it exists in our country. And you have heard about that, you have learned about discrimination, right? You have learned about stereotypings, you have learned about various examples where in India we can find certain inequalities that exist. Correct or not? Now think about these people. If there were no reservation in constituencies, in jobs, would they have been able to fight in elections? Would they have been able to represent themselves? Right? Would they have been able to see themselves as equals in society? No, students. So therefore, here we have to understand that they were not given equal opportunities. They did not have enough resources. They did not have source of education, right? They could not go and educate themselves, go and read in some good schools or get better education like other people who are getting in the society, right? People belonging to the general category, let's say. And therefore, they could not fight elections on equal terms. Here in Lok Sabha, therefore, we have 84 seats that are reserved for scheduled caste. And then we have 47 seats that are reserved for scheduled tribes. Also, in our parliament, students, when we are talking about the equal representation. Now, if we were not having these reserved constituencies, in our parliament, we would have failed to represent a large section of our population. Why? Because this section again would be neglected. When we are talking about the weaker sections, when we are talking about the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, they would not have a chance to stand up or fight in an election, right? So they would be the neglected part of our society here again. So therefore, reserved constituencies have certain advantages. Now, this is just a data that I thought to share here. When we are talking about the general elections, total number of seats, how many? 412. We know that scheduled caste have 84 seats and scheduled tribe have 47 seats. Now, when we are talking about state-wise, the distribution of seats, as in for scheduled caste, in UP we have 17, West Bengal we have 10, Andhra Pradesh we have 7, Tamil Nadu we have 7, and in Bihar we have 6. Now, when we are talking about the states with maximum number of ST seats, ST here it means we are talking about scheduled tribe. Okay. So here in Madhya Pradesh we have 6, Jharkhand we have 5, Odisha we have 5, Chhattisgarh 4 and Maharashtra 4. Now if we look at these parties that won SC seats, right? So here BJP, as you can see in 2019 they got the maximum number of votes, 46. When we are talking about ST, BJP again wins here, that is 31 seats. So these are some of the important points that you can keep in mind since we are learning about the reserved constituencies and when we refer to the 2019 elections, okay, the recent general election that took place. Now in many states, seats are also reserved in panchayats and municipalities. When we are talking about panchayats, it means that we are referring at village level. When we are talking about the municipalities, we are referring at urban level. Okay. So here seats have been reserved for other backward classes. We call them as OBCs. Okay. Apart from this, 1/3 seats are reserved in rural and urban local bodies for women candidates. Another very important point here, that women also have certain rights, right? They can also participate in elections, right? They can also fight in elections, they can stand in elections, and they can prove themselves that they can be a better leader, correct or not? So therefore, again in our constitution, that women should also get fair chance to participate in elections, to win in elections. So 1/3 seats were reserved for women in rural and urban local bodies for women, in elections. Okay. So these are some of the points that you have to keep in mind here when we are talking about the reserved constituencies. So here we understood what are reserved constituencies. We talked about the two caste, the weaker sections here. We talked about OBCs, we talked about SCs, STs and SCs. Okay. So this was all about reserved constituency, students. In your next topic, you are going to understand about the voters list. Thank you very much.